Good afternoon, everyone. Bon après-midi tout le monde. My name is Mike Schreiner, the MPP for Guelph and the leader of the Ontario Green Party. And I just want to say, wherever you live in Ontario, it has a rich Indigenous history. I'm speaking to you today from the Treaty 13 lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. And I want to reaffirm the Green Party's commitment to the truth and reconciliation process. And I want to say that there is no doubt Ontario is facing a housing affordability crisis that is only getting worse. It's getting harder and harder for Ontarians to find an affordable place to call home. Rent prices are getting out of control in this province. There are no neighborhoods in Barrie, Guelph, Hamilton, Kitchener, Peterborough, Ottawa, Thunder Bay, many other communities where the average 1 or 2 bedroom apartment is affordable for a full-time minimum wage worker. And owning a home is out of reach for far too many Ontarians. We recognize the crisis situation we are in. And now the question is how do we address it? There's no beating around the bush. We need to create and build more homes. There's simply not enough housing supply to keep up with demand. But let's also be clear that solving this crisis will require us to engage both the private sector and the public sector, increasing investment while working with all 3 levels of government to increase housing supply. And we can do this without paving over the farmland that feeds us or the wetlands that protect us from flooding. Instead of expensive sprawl and increased climate pollution, Ontario Greens are about building livable, affordable communities within existing built-up areas. I want to be clear that environmental protections are not red tape. They're part of the answer to the housing affordability crisis, not a barrier. The bottom line is urban sprawl is expensive, inefficient, and unsustainable. It's bad for our health and our wallets. No one wants to spend hours commuting every day, but that's exactly what the current pro-sprawl model of development in Ontario encourages. We have to be honest, there are 88,000 acres of land approved for development within existing urban boundaries in the Greater Golden Horseshoe alone. And we can make use of that existing space by building communities where people can live, work, play, and shop. We can increase housing supply through infill development, missing middle, and gentle density. We can improve as of right zoning to make it easier to build and for existing homeowners to turn their primary residence into duplexes, triplexes, and quadplexes. We can build new homes by streamlining the application process for laneway houses, secondary suites, and basement apartments. We can make better use of underutilized land like parking lots, abandoned plazas, and brownfield sites to unlock spaces for new homes. With the right public investment, we can work with nonprofit and co-op housing providers to build 160,000 purpose-built, permanently affordable rental homes in partnership with the federal government over the next day. The Ontario Greens will invest in livable and walkable communities connected by affordable transit. Instead of dumping billions on highways most Ontarians and municipalities don't even want. We can build along transit corridors, pre-zoning for the missing middle in mid-rise developments along those transit corridors and main streets. We can remove minimum parking requirements to make it easier and more affordable for private sector developers to build more affordable places for people to live. I want to be clear, housing doesn't have to be a choice between tall or sprawl, between never-ending subdivisions or skyscraping condos. We can build the missing middle and mid-rise housing. In addition to that, housing supply needs to be targeted to the end users, the renters and the homeowners. We need the tools in place to address speculation, to ensure that housing is for people and families, so that first-time home buyers are not competing with corporate investors, so that homes don't sit empty. Tools like a vacant home tax that clamp down on rampant speculation. And we need to make sure we build the right supply, which means housing types that suit families of all sizes, homes that are accessible for people of all abilities, and that are energy efficient so people can afford to heat and cool them. So let's build inclusive communities that work for everyone, communities that are sustainable and connected, healthier, more prosperous, and more resilient, communities that are livable and affordable, communities where both the private sector increases housing supply and where government makes the investments that hasn't been made over the past 3 decades to ensure deeply affordable supply. Let's build communities where people have equitable access to parks, amenities, and vital public services. Communities that are great places to live, no matter who or where you are. Communities that are designed with inclusion and equity. Communities where it's easy to support local businesses. These are the types of communities people want to live in. And I think the pandemic has highlighted that even more. Inclusive, affordable, sustainable communities that protects the nature, that protects us from expensive flooding instead of paving over it. Communities that make life greener and healthier, that crush climate pollution instead of making our health and climate emergency worse with more highway sprawl and toxic emissions. We know what the solutions are. Housing has been an issue in Ontario for far too long, and it's time now for new solutions to an old problem. And that's the kind of leadership the Ontario Greens Housing Affordability Plan brings forward. And Green MPPs are eager to work with you to address the housing affordability crisis and build the communities we want, working in partnership with all levels of government and all sectors of our society. To make this happen, we need the right leadership, vision, and political will to make it happen. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak with all of you today. So let's get to work on building the Ontario we all want. Thank you, merci, and megwich, and I'm excited to take questions from the audience. So if you're a premier, would you ask your housing minister to sign the MZO for the City of Toronto's supporting modular housing site in Willowdale? So I just want to be very clear that I think the current government has overused and misused ministerial zoning orders. But in those places where it's an appropriate use, where there's local council support, absolutely. I absolutely support expanding modular housing for permanent supportive housing. I've gone to neighborhoods in Toronto, in the East End of Toronto, saying that. I've participated in discussions in my own community in Guelph, developing strategies to have a yes in my backyard plan. And I think one of the things that really sets apart the Ontario Greens housing strategy is a plan to look at best practices around the world. In particular, I'm looking at practices in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where they've actually designed public consultation processes to get to yes. By including people who don't live in existing neighborhoods as part of that public consultation process. So we're not only consulting the people who live there, but the people who could live there if we build the supply there. A question about making affordable home ownership available for a low amount of dollars, and absolutely I support that. And one of the ways we can do that is to address the high cost of land acquisition. So one of the points in our plan is to use public land to make it available without charge to nonprofit co-op and social housing providers and private developers who commit long-term to deeply affordable housing. One of our biggest assets is publicly owned lands, and let's utilize that asset to increase the supply of affordable housing. And I just want to say how much I greatly appreciate the opportunity to be with you today. I encourage everyone to go to gpo.ca/housing and give our housing plan a read. Some have called it a masterclass plan in addressing the affordability crisis, and we're very eager to work with you to address housing affordability for all people in all communities in Ontario. Thank you so much.